everyone, it's Sharana from Pay or Wait, and today I'm going to be reviewing Watchmen Season 1, Episode 1. It's summer and we're running out of ice. So, for those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. Hello. I just want to let you guys know how I do my weekly recaps of TV shows. This is going to be a recap / review of the episode. I'm going to talk about some of the major plot points, so this is going to be a spoiler review. So if you have not watched Watchmen yet, pause this video, go watch it, because I don't know why you haven't watched it yet, because it's awesome, and then come back because I don't want to spoil the experience for you. So going into the beginning of the episode, I find it very interesting that we find ourselves watching this kind of short film in a theater, and so I think it's interesting. We see kind of the black sheriff, the black marshal of Oklahoma arresting the local sheriff for stealing cattle. I think it's interesting to point out that I felt as though them showing us that how the black marshal's outfit is kind of like Sister Knight's outfit is a reminiscent of that. Maybe I'm reaching, but that's just the vibes that I was getting from it. But we quickly are brought into that there is a woman who is kind of playing the music for the film. We see that she is crying and her young son is just happily watching this film, but we quickly realize that there is something bad happening outside. We hear explosions happening, shots happening, and then we see a man come in who is her husband, the young boy's father, and he's trying to bring them to safety. And so for one of the things that I found very interesting, I was like, wow, like this is like really heavy for a season opener, and especially not what one would think when we hear Watchmen in this new series. And so what I would have to say is I do want to give them kudos for actually talking about the Black Wall Street riots. And so for those of you who don't know, this was actually a real historical event that happened May 31st and June 1st in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. This town there was a section called Black Wall Street, which is the wealthiest black town in the U.S. at that time. And so there was basically a massacre that happened where all of these black residents were killed in this town. And basically between 100 to 300 people were murdered. The Red Cross actually didn't want to give an estimate of how many people were killed during that massacre, but there were over 800 wounded sent to the hospital. I think over 10,000 people, they were left homeless after this. There was damage that amounted to 1.5 million, which is about 32 million in property damage of what that would be in 2019, just to give an overview of like how devastating this was. And so it was to the point where many didn't talk about it. A lot of people don't know that that is something that actually happened. Like that is real. That really happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We weren't taught about it in school. Even when I was having conversations with people as we were talking about this episode, I was like, you guys never heard of the Wall Street riots, the Black Wall Street massacre? And they were just like, no, like this is a real thing. So yes, I just wanted to point that out, that actually happened. And actually the kind of the relatives of those who were involved in that massacre, they were later in 2018, I think they were awarded reparations in the form of a scholarship fund. But I just think I was very shocked that they actually put that in there. I'm happy that they did, because a lot of people didn't know about that. And if you didn't know, now you know that was a real thing that wasn't just put there to just have all that, you know, pain and anguish in the opening of the episode. But I thought it was a very bold and interesting choice, because I know that probably rubbed a couple of people the wrong way when they were watching it. But we see that this young boy, we see that his father puts him on this cart to basically get him to safety, young Will Reeves. And we see that he writes watch over this boy on a note, and he gives it to the boy. And then we see later that he makes it out alive, but the adults are unfortunately dead. And then he sees the crying baby, and he carries the baby to safety, where we are brought to present day Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2019, where we see a man being pulled over by a police officer. And we thought it was interesting that the police officers, they actually have their faces covered up. But can we just point out the obvious, that you thought it was really weird that this white man, I'm sorry y'all, but I'm just saying, he was listening to Future. I was like, sir, you did not look like the type that would be listening to Future, because he looked like he was like a farmer. He had lettuce in the truck. So I'm just trying trying to figure out what in the heck is going on right now. But we see he's pulled over. He gets kind of lippy with the officer as he asks him for his license and registration. And then we see that he sees a mask in the glove compartment when he's pulling out his registration, which puts the officer on high alert. And when he goes back to the car, he calls into the station and says that he sees cavalry contraband. And so we see that he's trying to get a release for his firearm because he believes that he is in danger. And then the man was taking forever, and you saw that he was like, ugh, who is on the desk right now? And they were like, Panda. And he seemed very apprehensive, like, can we get somebody else? And then he's trying to, like, hey, I need the release of my firearm. And, like, this dude is, like, jerking around. I was just like, dude, like, are you serious? And I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm going to be honest. I was like, Lord, I hope that they're not doing this on purpose, that this isn't a setup. But one of the things that I do find interesting is when we later in the episode find out who Panda was, he was a black man. And I was shocked. And you know what, y'all? I can say it right now. I made an assumption because that's just where my mind took me, but I was wrong, and I found that very interesting, and I just wanted to point that out to you. But we see that his suspicions were correct. As he gets the release of his firearm, before he can even get out of the car, we see that the man has the cavalry mask on, and he shoots him dead, which we get to meet our police chief, Judd Crawford, who is played by Don Johnson. I was like, hey, Don. He's in Knives Out, another great movie you guys should go see at the end of this year, or actually coming out later in November. But we see that he's the police chief. For some reason, he's sitting through the play of Black Oklahoma, which is going to have a very significant relevance once we get to the end of the episode. But we see that he's really dressed normal. You wouldn't even know that he was a police chief. And so we're kind of seeing this theme where everyone is basically living double lives. So we see that he goes to get changed into his uniform. He goes to visit the officer. And even when we see that he goes to question the officer's wife, you know, she talks about how it's illegal for people to tell them that they're the actual police, that they have to remain anonymous. And so we get to learn this as he's kind of letting her know what happened to her husband, as he's giving her a line of questioning. And so as all of this is happening, basically we are then introduced to Sister Night, but she is not Sister Night yet. Miss Regina King, who just was excellent in this episode. We see that she's Angela, and Angela is just teaching a normal bakery class where we kind of get a little bit more information into her background and more into why the officers are covered up. And so she talks about the White Night, in which the cavalry basically came in and they found all of the actual names and addresses of where these police officers and their family lived, and they basically tried to kill all of them. And I was like, man, why are you giving them all this like information? She tells them that she was shot and that they had to pull all her guts out. I was just like, ma'am, these are kids. Why are we saying all of this? Even the teacher had to interrupt her. But then Tommy asked her, did she buy her bakery with the reparations? So we know that President Redford, he is the current president in this world right now, and so we don't really know what that is. Are those reparations to the officers, or is this more of a black and white type of thing? We don't really know yet, but we know that it was a bad thing because Angela was like, excuse me, what did you say? And then this kid Topher just runs and basically gets into a fight with him, and then I was just confused. And so this brings me into my next whole question that I want to ask, that I know that you guys were thinking, but it's okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Why Angela got all these white kids? I'm just saying, I know y'all was thinking it, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it for everyone because I was really confused. So we see that Topher is her son, and so we see that they're driving home, and then in the middle of them driving home, we see a squid storm. There's literally raining squid, which is a tie back to the graphic novel. And so we're kind of learning more about this world, and we even see images of Dr. Manhattan, who was on Mars at the time. We're kind of seeing how we were living in the same world, just years and years down the road. And so we see that she has another little daughter, calling her mommy. We're introduced to her husband, Calvin, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. I hope I said his name right. And so, yeah, I'm just having a lot of questions as to like how all of this is playing out. And so essentially we see that when she goes home, he tells her, hey, you got to text on this pager, Little Bighorn, and she looks shook like, hey, I got to go to the bakery. But we later found out that the bakery is a lair. And so she gets into her Sister Night outfit. And I was like, guys, what a time to be alive to see a black woman on screen kicking butt with a nice costume. I was just like, yes, Regina giving me all of my life. Then she goes to pick up this random dude, like hits him, puts him in the trunk, goes to the police station where we see that there is a video that is being shown of the 7th Cavalry, who is a white supremacist group. And they're basically sending the police officers a message saying that, hey, we are here to clean the streets of basically black people. And I don't know if that's like if other people are included, but we know black people were involved. And basically they're saying there are going to be more police deaths if they try to get into their way. And then we see the theme of what we've been seeing in the messaging and the marketing for Watchmen, the TikTok. And so it's an interesting conversation that Sister Night, aka Angela, and Judd have, as she just real comfortable on his desk. And then she basically says like, hey, you know, I already have somebody, because we saw that he released the firearms where we learned the Panda black man. He looks like, you're going to regret this. And then he basically says, well, hey, it's my funeral, which we later know that that's a foreshadowing of what happens towards the end of the episode. And so we see that she makes a comment saying like, he was like, how do you already have someone? She was like, I knew what you were going to do. And she was like, how do you know he fits the profile? Because he told everyone to go to Nixonville, where I guess some of the cavalry are hidden amongst the people. And she was like, well, I could smell a white supremacist a mile away. And she said, and it smells like bleach. So they interrogate him, and then basically they take him to this weird looking thing called the pod, and they show kind of this propaganda to see his eyes dilate, to see his reactions as they're basically interrogating him, asking him, is he a part of the 7th Cavalry? And so we see that we get no answers until Sister Night, she goes and beats him into, gives him a little inspiration, shall we say, and he basically tells them where they are hiding out at. And so what I find weird is in the mix of all, and I guess I can finish this up. So they go to the cattle. There's a big shootout. We see that they're fighting against the other cavalrymen, but they were doing something weird. They were actually taking out batteries of watches, which kind of leads to this tick-tock, tick-tock. And so it's interesting to see what happens, like what is a part of that plan. But we see that she comes in contact with one of the men, actually the man who shot the police officer. And we see they get into a fight, but he ends up killing himself by swallowing a pill. And so I thought it was interesting. There's a sign that's on there with, they actually have one of like the Watchmen. Basically, it's a bake sign saying, hey, we keep out the riffraff, which is like black people, which is kind of a nod to where they were, you know, many years ago, and kind of the, what is the racial things that are kind of underlying, boiling over into this new town. And so I find it interesting that they had this weird spaceship looking submarine thing that was they used to shoot down the plane as the 2 cavalrymen got away. But I was just like, where did this technology come from? Because nothing else seems to be that high tech from what we see in the first episode. I'm sure that we can be introduced to a lot more, but I just found that whole little like submarine plane looking thing, I found it very interesting. But we later see that, I want to make sure that I get this in the right order. Okay, so yeah, so later we see that they basically go have dinner. Judd and his wife are having dinner at Angela Calvin's place. We get to see the kids. Everyone's laughing. And then I was like, Judd, so you just gonna leave in the middle of dinner and go do cocaine, and then you not even gonna make sure that you got it off your nose? I was just a little confused. I don't know if I was the only one. I was just like, sir, it's a family dinner. Children are present. What are we doing? But I thought it was absolutely hilarious. And so we see that he later goes home, where we see another tie into the Watchmen. We see kind of the this American hero story, which kind of we've seen the ads, the blimps, people holding signs talking about this story that's supposed to be this big television program that's going to air on TV. And we have another nod to the Watchmen from the comics. And so we see that he gets a phone call basically letting him know that the officer has woken up. And then as he goes to head to the hospital, we see that he has been ambushed, and that essentially he has been ambushed. And we know, unfortunately, that he ends up being hung at the end of the episode. But one of the things that I do want to talk about is we're introduced to another character who we don't learn a lot about in the first episode, played by Jeremy Irons. They refer to him as Master, but we know later that his name ends up being Will Veidt. I hope I said that right. I probably didn't, whatever. But we find it interesting because we see when Angela first walks into the bakery in the episode that Will Reeves, who is the old man who is in the wheelchair, that he is holding a newspaper that is saying that he has been declared, that Veidt has been declared dead, but obviously he's awake. And not only is he awake, it looked like the maid was doing something a little bit more than rubbing his thigh. I was confused at first. My mind went there. Lord, please help me. I know you guys were thinking it too, but she was just massaging his leg out. But he's living in in this big grand castle. They gift him with this watch tying into this TikTok theme. He says he writes a play called The Watchmaker's Son. We know that he's going to be a villain, and if you've read the comics, you know this as well, but we don't really know what that means for the series. But we know that he's someone that we possibly cannot trust. I want to know why he is faking his death right now. I don't know necessarily what is happening, but even with the little glimpse that they gave us, I'm very interested to learn more about his character. But we see that Angela and Calvin was getting it on. They was having a good little love-making session. It was just so beautiful, them beautiful black bodies, the lighting that they had on their bodies. And then Angela was like in there, and then the phone rang, and then she was like so mad. She answered the phone like, what? What do you want? And so she received a phone call, and the man is like, I know who you are. Is this your name? Is this your dad? Come meet me at this tree. There's something that you need to see, and don't wear your mask because I know who you are. So she gets scared. I get scared. Calvin look at her crazy. And then my girl, she go and lay up in the bed and pulls a gun out of the bed, pull a gun out of the fireplace. I was just like, she is so badass, and I am here for every single minute of it. But we see that she ends up going and she discovers the body of Judd, which I find it very interesting that she sees him hanging from the tree. We see that Will Reeves is the old man in the wheelchair, and we see that he is actually the young boy that we were introduced to at the beginning of the episode, and he is holding the note that says, watch over this boy, the note that his father gave him. So tying in what happened during the Black Wall Street massacre and kind of bringing it into present day, we see that that is the young boy, which was kind of like a shocker towards the end of the episode. But one of the things that I find very interesting is that we hear the song Poor Judd is Dead. And so basically this is a song that is actually from the Oklahoma play, which ties into the play that Judd was watching at the beginning of the episode. And then also too, when he says, hey, it's my funeral, which it ultimately ends up being his funeral as he's hanging from the tree. And I think it was very beautifully shot, even though it's very like horrible that he's dead. But we see his badge, and then we see the trickle of blood that falls upon it. And then the last words, then we hear the lyrics of the song, which says, it's summer and we're running out of ice, which is the lyrics from the song that is playing. And then also too, the last words of the song is poor Judd that is hanging from the tree now. And then the episode goes off. So I thought it was very interesting how they kind of used the Oklahoma play and then used these lyrics, and then how they became the title of what the episode was called. But for me, I was very intrigued by Watchmen. I think that there wasn't a lot of there's a lot of information that was given to us, but we really don't know what to do with it. I definitely think that this will take me watching the second and third episode to really see where they're going with the storylines. We kind of have a lot thrown at us, and especially since this is a continuation, we really don't know what we're in store for. And so I wonder if they're going to tie in kind of what happened at the beginning of the episode. Is this going to be an ongoing thing where we learn a little bit more about the history of Tulsa, how this relates back to the Watchmen? Are we going to see more references to the Watchmen that kind of predate to back in the 80s with the comics? But yeah, I was pretty interested. Regina King was kicking butt. I love the costume designs that they have, especially the shiny silver mask that one of the officers wore. I really love what they're doing with the show so far. I love how they kind of set this world up. I'm very excited to see what else they have in store for us for Watchmen, but I think that it was a very bold first episode, a very bold choice. I think that I can definitely see there being a lot of, you know, some people like, I'm not doing this, I'm not watching this, because there are political elements, but this is true history. Like, this actually happened, and the fact that they're infusing real events that have happened in the country into this TV show set in 2019, I think is absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to see what else they have in store for us. But those are my thoughts on Watchmen Season 1, Episode 1. It's summer and we're running out of ice. As always, my name is Sharonda from Pay Your Weights, and if you like what you saw today, make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, share this video with your friends, and make sure you hit that notification bell. And I love you guys 3000. I'll see you soon.